Welcome to the Week 7 Columbia Football Coaches Show presented by Amity Hall Uptown. I'm Lance Meadow here on GoColumbiaLions.com. As the Lions continue Ivy League play, still seeking their first victory, they'll head to New Haven, Connecticut on Saturday afternoon to battle Yale after they lost 4 in a row. And we're joined, as always, by John Poppe. And John, appreciate the time and the insight as always. It goes without saying, last week in Hanover was rough, but as you do each and every week, and I respect the hell out of you for doing this, you face the challenges head on. So let's start from the perspective of, you had some interesting comments after the game, and you mentioned, and I'm paraphrasing, the fact that, not to take anything away from Dartmouth, but when you spot an opponent 21 points, it's hard to stay competitive, let alone make the game entertaining, which was your point. And Dartmouth followed an ideal script. They had all 3 facets, scored touchdowns. When you look back at that game, how much was it a reflection of self-inflicted wounds, meaning what your team did to itself, as opposed to Dartmouth putting you in that position per se?
Yeah, it's always, combination of both, right? Credit to them for executing the deep post play of their first possession on offense, right? Where we didn't execute, in terms of our defensive back having the proper leverage on the football and be able to punch through. And then, our first drive, we're driving down the field and pick 6, and you'd love for an offensive lineman to make a tackle there, and there you go, right? That's our fault for throwing the ball in that position instead of maybe taking a sack, right? Knowing that's sometimes the smarter play as a quarterback, or, you drop a punt. We can't do that, right? And, that's where some technique things where your shoulders aren't squared to the ball as a punt returner, there's more likelihood to drop it, right? And you can't have those situations occur. You can't have a situation occur where you start the game and it's a great kick by the Dartmouth kicker, but we've got to field that football and get a fair catch and get that ball to minus 25. Now start the drive at the minus 8, because now we have the same drive. We're on the plus 17 instead of the plus 40, right, more or less. So all of those things mattered, and it really goes back to my mind in field position and creating the opportunity to have a normal field situation, right? We tried to fair catch one of the kickoffs, it got dropped.
Sure.
We got to take over again inside our own 10-yard line. We can't have those situations versus good football teams.
And all of those things add up, and they're cumulative, as we saw last week. You brought up the reference to that first drive where you were actually moving the football well until, unfortunately, Caleb Sanchez threw off his back foot and it led to a pick 6. John, I'm curious, when you go back and you watch the film, it's natural for football players, you're in the midst of a 4-game skid, things are not going right, to maybe try to put the cape on, right, and be the hero. How much are you seeing that? Maybe guys are getting a little bit out of character, and if you are seeing that, how do you combat that?
Yeah, you just try to show on film. Hey, by doing your job and just staying within yourself, right, being the best possible version of yourself, and coaches talk, right, you see what we did. We executed to our standard, our expectation, and then all of a sudden one thing doesn't go your way. Well, now we're missing gap fits. We're not staying tight to our, scraping the paint off the surface and fitting pullers the right way. We're trying to go above and beyond punching at footballs instead of wrapping a ball carrier up. And now 4-yard gains, 3-yard gains turn into 12 and 15. You've got guys overrunning quarterback on the quarterback pull on Grayson's long touchdown run, not just doing their job and being where they're supposed to be. And so really for us, it's showing them, okay, like, this doesn't work for you. But what works for us is when you just dial in and focus on your job and just being where you're supposed to be the right way, right? And that's where we've been successful this season in increments. When we haven't been successful, we have guys trying to go above and beyond and do 2 people's job.
When you get down 21-0, I think it's natural for everybody to say, well, you're going to throw the ball like crazy, right? Because you're trying to get big chunk plays. And you look at the numbers from last week, John, you still ran the ball 42 times, and you wound up throwing it 28 with the 2 sacks, so 30 dropbacks. That's a pretty respectable ratio, I'd say. The reason I'm bringing that up is, what was the conversation on the sideline when you went down to say, we can't get out of character to continue to put ourselves in a precarious spot and maybe still try to get something productive out of the ground game that you could build on here moving forward?
Exactly right. Just run our offense, right? Because we've tried to abandon the run game and go to the air, right? Lehigh and Lafayette, and that didn't work either. So for us, it was an opportunity to grow, right? And improve upon who we want to be and who we are, and have film to show, hey, this is where we're successful. This is what we need to continue to do at our level, our expectation. And that was kind of the thought behind it. Also, it started to rain a little bit, right? And Caleb has had a shoulder thing, and it gets a little cold, and we're trying to keep him warm on the sideline, but sometimes it's difficult. So there are elements kind of across the board of why we continue to stay with the run regardless of the score.
Clearly, special teams mishaps was a big theme from last week in terms of the block punt that led to a touchdown, and then, of course, what happened with the muff punt that shortened the field for Dartmouth for Grace Saunier to capitalize. What is the point of emphasis this week, John? Are you getting back to fundamentals? Are you looking to tweak schemes and protections? How do you walk that fine line where you don't want to reinvent yourself because you don't maybe have the luxury to do that, but at the same time, you've got to make sure that you make it an emphasis that this will not be duplicated here moving forward?
Yeah, for us, Kobe Cruz has had 2 drops this year. All right, make sure we're picking him up because he is our best returner, and getting him to understand the fair catch he signaled late. It was very late. Hey, right away, as soon as that ball has the right trajectory, fair catch right now, so you're not worried about doing 2 things at once, right? And it's understanding I'm 2 yards deep in the end zone. So trying to practice and give him that feel. We're taking a knee. We're not trying to take that ball out knowing we're kicking 5 yards closer. It's tough to get back from the 25 when you're 2 yards deep in the end zone. It is. And so make sure the focus is getting the ball in the offense in the right position. As a punt returner, well, season, we're trying out different guys, right? And to see this week and create different drill works for the guys with distractions and technique to keep their elbows tight so the drops don't happen. You might see a new face back there this week. So that all these things. And in protection, the frustrating thing for me is Dartmouth didn't even bring a block. They were in hold up. They were in, safe, and that's where it's on us. And as you look at tape, it's like, okay, we need to adjust some protection schemes regardless of what formation we're in. We need to reevaluate our rules to make sure this doesn't happen again. We got to make sure our shield, the back end guy's technique, he's not working up the field too fast, and he has that chance to come back and help late on that guy free off the edge, because you can't block everybody in punt protection, but you can remove him further from the block point. And that's been a focus for us this week.
And now the attention will turn to the Yale Bulldogs. We'll step aside when we return. We'll get John's perspective on the challenge that lies ahead in New Haven, Connecticut, and going up against one of the premier running backs in the Ivy League. That's coming up here on the Week 7 Columbia Football Coaches Show, presented by Amity Hall Uptown.
Amity Hall Uptown is the premier sports destination on the Upper West Side and the official home to Columbia University Athletics. Located just 951 steps from campus, Amity Hall is and will always be your home away from home.
Welcome back to the Week 7 Columbia Football Coaches Show, presented by Amity Hall Uptown. Lance Meadow, John Poppe with you as we now look ahead to the upcoming matchup against the Bulldogs in New Haven, Connecticut. John, there's a Yale team that is 2-1 in Ivy League play, 4-2 overall. They had a very impressive win over a team you just played, Penn, where they held the Quakers to 13 points. They're also a very tough team, John, it seems, at home. They've won 10 of their last 11. Columbia has not won there since 2015. You are obviously familiar with all the numbers. I want to start with, why is it so challenging, just the environment of going to the Yale Bowl and just solving the riddle of that beyond even the X's and O's that you have to combat?
And since 2015, they've been one of the top programs in the league. So they've been a very, very good football team too on top of that. And some of it is maybe it's just their structure of the facility, how far teams have to walk to actually get to the field, right? That's every little adversity, right? And it's a big stadium, right? And having been on the side of the line where it's a packed stadium, you're going into it probably this week where it's not a packed stadium. So you're kind of preparing your players for, hey, you're playing in front of families and friends, and that's it. Right, a couple thousand people, and it's really just about the focus is on us and how we're going to perform and how we're going to play. And they're a great team, and that's why you have to play your best football against them, because they have athletes that put you in some difficult and challenging positions with their speed and their strength.
Well, let's delve into those athletes. That's a good segue, and it starts with Josh Pitzenberger. He's got the trifecta. He leads the Ivy League in carries, rushing yards, and rushing touchdowns. Seems like he's been in the conference forever. I don't think anybody's going to be crying over him graduating, but in all seriousness, this is more of a conventional run game, I would say, John, that you're going to see this week, because the quarterback is not nearly as dynamic as some of the previous ones. What is the keys fundamentally that you have to emphasize to your defense to bottle him up and not make him wreck a game like he did against Penn with a $145 and a touchdown on the ground?
Yeah, you have to gang tackle him. And the first guy that makes contact, right, has to hit him appropriately, meaning, sink your hips, shoulder pad to thigh board, and wrap. Right, he's a strong dude. He runs with great pad level, and part of the, conversation or the equation to that too is, I think teams that have when they've had success, it's denting the line of scrimmage, right? Meaning creating a new line of scrimmage or preventing them from getting a lot of push. Because their interior offensive line and their tackles do a great job in their combination blocks and in making sure he's got forward momentum when he runs. And that's where our D-line has to show up this week. We have to fit gaps aggressively and set hard edges to the run game. And I said pursuit with great angles. Not just think he's down, he's wrapped up, and then he bursts loose, right? And there is an element of punching at the football. He's fumbled a few times, and we need to make sure our second guy in is working the football on him to get him to think about it maybe and not so much running full speed all the time.
Well, because he's so dynamic in first and second down, it makes third down a lot easier for specifically their quarterback, Dante Reno. And we've been talking about this the last few weeks. I'm not trying to give you nightmares, but Hayden Johnson and Liam O'Brien and Grayson Saunier all had success against your team on the ground. Reno is more of a pocket passer, so you don't necessarily have to tackle that. So what does that change in terms of what your defense can take risk-wise this week versus what maybe you couldn't afford to do in the previous games with a mobile, running-esque quarterback?
Yeah, I think we got to be smart because there's other ways that they can manipulate you if you're playing too heavy to the dive phase, right? In terms of bringing speed motion in and working back. I mean, there's different ways they can affect your eyes as tacklers, but in a standard zone read game, maybe our guy they're reading can work a little bit closer to the running back, knowing that he has an opportunity to affect the quarterback and maybe force Dante to bubble a little bit, knowing there's not that elite acceleration ability like we've seen the last 3 weeks. He still has some runs. He's smart in the pocket. He'll step up and get what he can, but there hasn't been that evidence yet that says he can run a ball for 65 yards like the last 3 guys we've faced. So I think for us, it's making sure we're great in our run games. We've got a guy in every gap. We're setting edges to each gap. And then in the pass game, we got to make sure we're glued to coverage because they do a good job with their playmakers on the perimeter. And Dante's been so far so good in terms of making sure there's catchable footballs for these guys.
To give his playmakers an opportunity to pursue after catching the football. On the defensive side, John, not to take anything away from the previous teams you've played, but when you look at Yale's numbers and even the film, it seems as if they have game-changing individual players, maybe more so than some, again, the previous opponents that you've gone up against. They've got the leading tackler in the Ivy League. Abu Kamara is up there in terms of pass defense. He had a fumble return for a touchdown last week. How much do those guys pop off the film, and what do you do in terms of maybe trying to avoid them, or can you even approach it from that perspective?
Yeah, Abu is all over the place. I mean, special teams, defense, I mean, you could tell he's, in my opinion, right now playing the highest level of football as an individual defender in our conference. And you really try to make sure you have a hat on him, right? In terms of the run game side of things, making sure you are accounting for him in all aspects of the run game. And you try to find those formations where maybe you can remove him or at least allow the offense to have a shot where he's not as impactful in the play. And so that's really where we're trying to find out where's our edge, right? And how do we build this game plan to limit the impact he can have? But they put him in so many different places. It's challenging sometimes to say he's not going to affect this play.
It's also been very challenging to score on Yale, right? Their last 3 opponents, they've held to 17 points or less. They wound up losing to Dartmouth on a last-second field goal, of course. Why is it been very hard to penetrate this overall Yale defense? And John, from your perspective, the numbers don't lie. It's been tough for your own team to score. So what does that mean maybe for your approach to this game? Is this one of those grinded out type affairs where it's got to be muddy and ugly and you're okay with that? Or do you have to maybe take some chances that previous opponents haven't taken against this Bulldogs defense?
Well, it's all about situation, right? We've got to be great on first and second down to give our chance a third down being manageable, where we have the opportunity to both run or throw, right? We can't be in 3rd and 8s because now those pass rushers are teeing off and getting great, get-offs on the ball, and they're in zone coverage where now their playmakers in the secondary can do some different things with the ball in the air. So we've got to be great in first and second down and controlling the line of scrimmage. And yes, do we want to limit possessions in this game? Maybe, right? Knowing when could be a factor. We got to make sure our run game, we are finding that edge. Whatever formation it might be, whatever shifts and motions we have to find the edge in the run game and making sure we do not turn the ball over. that has been recipe for disaster for us in this game, in this losing streak, and that's why we need to make sure as an offense we're staying on the field as much as possible in this game.
On the topic of your run game, let's turn to your offense here before we wrap up. And Chase is going to be back after missing the last 3 games, and clearly he's taken his fair share of hits. So before I ask you maybe an X's and O's question, how is he mentally and physically, and what have you been working on with him from an offensive approach that maybe could change things, especially in terms of what he brings to you as an extension of the run game?
Yeah, Chase hasn't changed, right? He knows he's taking a shot or 2 shots, right? In terms of this game's physical, right? It's violent. He knows that. He embraces that, and that's why he's a team captain as a junior. And for us, during his recovery time, we had opportunity to get him versus the first defense and prep against speed for this moment when he would return to play, right? Return to the lineup. I felt he did a great job of staying in the pocket and embracing that role for that week or 2 weeks. And then now, he's got to be able to use his legs in this game, right? We've seen Yale's defense at times give up scrambles and positive plays, and that's where he can kind of take some pressure off himself by establishing himself as a threat in the run game. Right, and now maybe open up some windows on the 2nd and 3rd level. Doesn't allow those defenders to get as deep in their pass drops. Now they have to spy them a little bit more. Well, now that can open up some things in the pass game as well.
You're certainly not looking for sympathy from the public audience, the Ivy League fans and so forth, but the reason I preface my next comments is you have had 6 different quarterbacks take a snap in that position, which I don't envy you for, and I don't think any coaching staff wants to have to deal with. What has it been like from a chemistry standpoint, John? Chase has been in the offense, Caleb's been in the offense, but that still doesn't necessarily make it any easier because you got a lot of young receivers, you got running backs. So what has been the process and what has it been like navigating all of that to get these guys ready on a weekly basis with so many movable parts? Yeah,
it is tough from a rep perspective, right? At times, especially with the freshmen entering the lineup, knowing we've had some veteran receivers go down with injury too.
Yeah.
But Coach Saitu does a great job. Our offensive staff does a great job of just creating seamless terminology, right? Building plays where we can be successful, at least on paper, right? To individual strengths. And I thought we had done a great job with Caleb and making sure he's comfortable with Penn and Dartmouth. The throws we're asking him to make, the offense we're asking him to execute. And same thing with Chase. I mean, it's very similar, but now there is some run game stuff that becomes available with Chase that maybe we can't do as much with Caleb. And the chemistry side of things, we're doing the best we can, right, to create reps. Maybe we've got more team to try to create that chemistry and force that chemistry as opposed to having more individual time, knowing that, okay, this guy might get to that spot on this dig route a little faster than the other guy did. So we have to continue to try to force that chemistry through repetition, through actual practice, right? Instead of saying, all right, individual skills, that's pre-practice, right? Team chemistry, that's what we got to build during practice during the allowable time.
John, as always, greatly appreciate the time and the insight, and best of luck come Saturday afternoon in New Haven. Could be windy based on the temperatures and the projections, but that's not going to stop Ivy League football from going front and center. The game is going to be on ESPN Plus with a noon Eastern kickoff. As this has been the Week 7 Columbia Football Coaches Show presented by Amity Hall Uptown.